folks, and welcome to this week's show. My special guest is Paul, and we're going to be doing another one of those album ranking shows from the years, and we're still in the 70s, and we're up to 1971, which in itself is quite an incredible year. Loaded, to say it's loaded, it would be an understatement. There's 30, 40 albums that we could have chosen that would have made the top 10. And it's been absolute torture to sort of hammer some of these lists down, Paul. I don't know about you. I don't know how you found it.
Absolute nightmare. I've changed my list. I don't know how many times. I'm still changing it just now as I speak.
I've just done mine as well. I've removed two of the albums that I genuinely love. So I'm a bit gutted about myself. Folks, if you get the chance, read the David Hepworth book, 1971, which, as if by magic, appears on the screen there. Yep. Never a dull moment. And it's a fantastic read. It's his argument for why 71's the greatest year ever for music in terms of albums. I think he has a real strong case. I'm not sure if I agree. I think there are some real, but he has a real strong, it is a really strong argument. For me, 71's definitely up there. 75, 77, 79, 80. So there's a number of years, and that's certainly one of them. It's a fabulous year, but what a ridiculous year in terms of albums. I think a lot of albums were held over from 1970 and then just released in 1971. And there's a couple that I'll mention as we go into it. And you think, wow, it makes it even tougher a choice. 70 was pretty straightforward. 71's been torturous. So
the other thing about that particular era, talking about 71 and the albums that came out, was the number of bands who actually had two albums come out in the same year. Yes did, Rory Gallagher did. Some of the bands I was thinking about, there was somebody else as well I was thinking about.
Rod Stewart did, one with the Faces and one with himself. In fact, he had three. I think he had two by the Faces and one by himself come out that same year, which is absolutely nuts.
Makes the job even more difficult.
So there's a serious amount of great albums that year. So Paul, I'm going to let you start the proceedings in a second, but folks, we've got the album ranking section on the screen there, and if you have a little look at them with regards to ranking the albums, it's quite clear in terms of the 5 different choices that we've got. Okay, so if you look at them clearly there, in terms of 5 stars, it's pretty obvious. It's an absolute stone cold classic, isn't it? So a masterpiece. 4.5 is essential. 4 is excellent. 3.5, very good. It's very good, still tremendous, isn't it? 3, good. 2.5, fair. 2, weak. 1.5, very poor. 1.5, awful, and not 0.5, don't bother. Which we haven't really reached that stage yet, but I'm sure we will at some point. So those are the rankings, and we're going to start off, Paul, with yourself today. So what have you got in at number 10?
The first thing I was going to say before we go into it is this is a very personal choice of albums for me, based on the fact that I was 15 in 1971, basically like a kid in a sweet shop, because I just really discovered there was more to music than Top of the Pops, although albeit Top of the Pops was still a big thing in those days. But suddenly to find this Aladdin's cave of other music that was out there, which was just fantastic, and diving headlong into that. So the approach I've taken is really it's almost like, to me, it's almost like Desert Island Discs, in the sense that almost all the albums I've chosen at the 10 are albums which I loved at the time and I still love today, and I couldn't really live without. And I'm not saying it's the best 10 albums. It's my favourite 10 albums, and albums that would definitely I would want to have on a desert island with me. So
and that's the whole point of it. Because there are certain albums that won't make either of our lists, and we all go, oh, they're absolute classics, and you could see why they would easily make top 10 albums of that year. But maybe they don't fit in with what we personally love, and that's absolutely fine. And that's the whole point of it. There is no wrong answers to this show. There are no wrong answers. It's just down to what you love. So what have you got at number 10 then?
Number 10, I have in. Just for a second. I have in the Yes album. Now, the Yes album was one of, as we just alluded to, one of 2 Yes albums that came out that year, because Fragile also came out later on the same year. I I love that album. It was at a time when I was basically discovering straight on rock bands like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin. Yes, were a little bit different, you know, with a kind of more prog approach, and I really just loved that album from the first time I heard it. You know, I think it was the last album that featured Tony Banks and the first album that featured Steve Howe. I think it was a little bit of a difference in musical approach, which led to Tony Banks leaving, because that was at the time when synthesizers were beginning to come into vogue, and Banks wasn't really all that keen on going down that route, from what I can hear, and didn't really think his style was going to fit in with Steve Howe. Nevertheless, I still think it's a great album. I struggle sometimes with John Anderson's voice. I have to admit, it's not, you know, it's a bit of a something I can take or leave at times, but I love it on this album. It's just an album which really kind of is a definite on my list. You know, there's just some great tracks in it, and the whole idea of sort of songs or movements of music where there was 2 or 3 different passages was all like an introduction to prog music, I suppose, for me, which I kind of moved away from prog after my teens, but I'm sort of really back into it now, and I kind of trace it right back to that album, really, because I probably didn't realise at the time that album was going to have a sort of profound effect in what I listened to much later on. But yeah, there's some great playing on it. Obviously, Steve Howe, you know, showcasing his guitar playing, which is incredible. You know, Chris Squire, being a bass player, fantastic bass player. Loved his style as well. And just, you know, I just think it's a really great all-round introduction to prog music. Some people might argue that Fragile was a better album, but it is what it is. That's my choice, and I would give it 3.5 stars.
Okay, interesting. All mine are 5 stars. I'm going to put that out there now. My number 10 was going to be Fragile, but I've switched it, and I've gone for LA Woman by The Doors. It's just a great album. It's very bluesy with a little touch of psychedelia. I just think it's a great album. Morrison's last album, of course, before he died that year. The band are different as well, because they've got Jerry Sheff on bass as well, who I think adds quite a lot to the album. He just gives it much more of a feel being a bass player rather than just the bass pedals on the keyboards that we'd had previously. And I think he's a great bass player. I've seen him once as well. Funny enough, my little anecdote is so Elvis Costello at the City Hall about 87, I think it was, with the Confederates, which is James Burton on guitar and Jerry Sheff on bass. So it was Elvis Presley's backing band. And me and my mate Neil were front row. And I was just covered in spit by Elvis Costello with his vocal style. And I was wearing this country and western top, and I had a bit of long curly hair at the time, a la Prince. And I remember Jerry Sheff looking down, and he looked and he winked at us and started laughing. You could see what I was like. I was having to keep wiping my face. So yeah, it's bizarre. Great bass player. Oddly enough, he went and started living in Northumberland, which is really weird for this great American bass player. Went and moved over here and lived in Northumberland. It's just bizarre. Anyway, I digress. Getting back to The Doors. It's a great album. It kicks off with a really fantastic song, The Changeling, which Morrison rightly wanted to be a single. It's got that hard funk drive to it. I love the keyboards on this when it just sort of kicks in with sort of Manzarek. That's mad, absolutely superb. Really great song. Morrison's voice on this album for me is his best vocal. Then we have a lovely pop rock song, Love Her Madly. It's just a really good, catchy song with this sort of end bit there, which is, is immense. We then have one of my favorite blues songs that I've been down so long. Morrison's voice is gruff, aggressive, everything I want to hear in a great blues song. Just superb delivery. They used to have blues days when they were recording this album. So that's why this album's got a number of blues tracks on it. And this is one of the ones that they wrote for it, superb. What a great song. The slide on it as well. Krieger's fantastic. Robbie Krieger, what a player. Then side one, you've got LA Woman again, great song. And it's got the anagram of Jim Morrison with Mojo Rising, which I think is quite a funny little take. I like that. I think that's very, very clever. 8 minutes as well. It's almost bordering prog territory. It's got all that sort of feel to it. Side two is a bit more bluesy. You know, you got blues tracks like King Snake on, which is John Lee Hooker gets a credit, and all the other tracks. But it's great. I mean, the song I really love on this album is on that side. It's Hyacinth House, just fantastic. And I love those little proggy type stops in it. And then, of course, at the end, you've got Riders in the Storm, one of the great sort of jazz rock type tunes. It's very spacious, got a lovely feel, absolute killer of an album, absolute quality. So there we go. That's my number 10, LA Woman by The Doors. Where have we got at number 9, Paul?
Number 9, I've got another prog album, prog album as it happens, Meadow by Pink Floyd. Again, my introduction to Pink Floyd really, and it was a band which I then kind of veered away from for a long time, but latterly I've really got back into them again in a big way. And I think Meadow, it just kind of it kind of gave a little taster of what was to come from Pink Floyd. You know, Dark Side of the Moon was the album, not the next album, but the album after that, because they did what was the album they did in between? I forget. Anyway, it was just a really great introduction to Pink Floyd, and you can hear the direction they were going to take their music on. Particularly two of the tracks. One of These Days, the opener, which is really atmospheric, and then there's a couple of less consequential, kind of less substantial tracks. But then you've got the B side of the vinyl album was Echoes, which to me is just sums up Pink Floyd and at that time. Just a fantastic 23 and a half minutes of it. Just a great, you know, right from the opening kind of. Roger Waters' bass, and it just kind of, and it's not something that when you listen to you think it's overblown. The 24, to me, it still sounds fresh, you know. And I was reading about it this morning actually, and reading that it was the first time Pink Floyd had been let loose with a 16 track, and they were like basically again like kids in the sweet shop, and that they could include so many more different sounds. And apparently the engineers and people in the studio were getting driven demented because they were recording all sorts of household items, just basically try to find out what different noises they could actually include in the album, which ones actually made it as, I'm not 100% sure, but that was kind of like a whole new thing for them, the whole idea of being able to record 16 tracks. But just a great album to me, and as I say, my introduction to Pink Floyd, and a band that I came back to big time much later on in my life, you know, but I would give it 4.5 stars.
Yeah, it's a good album, isn't it? It's a very, very good album. And of course, they did the big Pompeii show as well at that time.
I meant to mention that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is fantastic. If people get the opportunity to go there, what a beautiful place that is. Absolutely. Just standing there, and the whole surround is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Also, the little permanent exhibition they've got to Pink Floyd, which I forgot to mention, is quite something to see as well, you know. So definitely worth it. Anyone that's in that part of Italy is definitely worth a visit to. If you go to Pompeii, make a point of checking out the Pink Floyd exhibit in the Pompeii itself. Yeah,
definitely go. It's about an hour from Sorrento on the train, and it's dead easy to get to. It literally stops outside. So fantastic.
Amazing place.
Right, my number 9 is Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. I think it's a great album again. I'll see all mine are 5 stars. This is their heaviest album. It's one of those odd albums, and the reason why it's so great is the tone is so unusual. They detune by 3 semitones in a number of songs on this album, so he's really sort of changed the landscape of guitar playing on this album. It's so different because it sounds so sludgy at times. I think is a word I'm going to make up there. It's got that sludge type sound. It's like it's almost nondescript at times, but it's heavy as hell. It's really almost created that doom metal sound that would subsequently come along later on as well. And there was no doubt in my mind, this is the sort of first album that does that. And it's an album that's quite different to the previous two classic albums, Black Sabbath and Paranoid. This is, again, a totally different sort of type of album. Obviously, there are similarities between the other two, but it's quite a different and heavier album. It starts off with Sweet Leaf, about their love of cannabis. It's a great song, you know, quite funny. Then it's almost like another riff-driven song with their After Forever, but it's almost like, it's not poppy, but it's got that sort of feel like Led Zeppelin could have written it. I would say it's got that sort of, it's a little lighter than the normal Sabbath sort of feel for me. Children of the Grave, I love. I think it's one of their best songs. And speaking of Floyd, you were saying before there, it's got that Floyd type thumping bass on it, an unusual sort of bass sort of sound on it. Again, with that heavy doom feel, great heavy guitars. Then you got a couple of like unusual things. I mean, Orchid, a little bit later on the album, it's like a minute and a half sort of classical song. Embryo, a little short 30-second thing. Lord of This World is a really good song. Could have been on the previous album, I think. It's got that sort of, you know, that rock sort of breaks off in other bits type of feel to it, but it's fantastic. Again, the drumming, as ever. Bill Ward, fantastic. Solitude is like their previous, is like a bit like sort of would have fitted quite comfortably on that previous album as well. That soft, sort of gentle, sort of lilt and feel. It's pastoral, it's sort of very light. And then it's preparing you for the heaviness that is Into the Void, which is just like riff-tastic. But flying into space and leaving the earth to rot and finding a new peaceful home to go and sort of live in, which is unusual, but, you know, really great. It's a really short album. It's about 34.5 minutes or something. Really, really short album. Bearing in mind, two of the songs, if you add them together, equal 2 minutes. So it's really 6 songs and a couple of little bits thrown together. But it's a real game changer of an album for people who are into metal. So yeah, Master of Reality there, my number 9, top draw album. What have you got into number 8, Paul?
I'm pleased you included that album, because I agonised over whether to include Masters of Reality or not, and I just got squeezed out. But yeah, because I love Black Sabbath at that time. My first 4 albums, in fact, were absolutely amazing. You know, so I'm pleased you did include that. My album at number 8 is an album which I overlooked. Well, I forgot it actually came out in 1971, until I was reminded the other day by my friend, and it's Free Live. Which is an album which I bought when it first came out. It was rushed out by the record by Island after Free had broken up the first time. It's maybe a bit flawed in the sense that there's certain things about it that aren't perfect. It wasn't all recorded at the one concert. There's some overdubbed crowd noises, but that absolutely doesn't take away one jot from the quality of the music that's on that album. And I know you and I have talked about Free before when we did the program on Free albums. But
yes, check out our Free album show, folks. Please check it out.
Yes, talking about one of our great loves, Free, which we could do all day. And I know when we were talking about the Free albums on that show, you were talking about how sort of chaotic the version of All Right Now is. It's on that, but I actually love the chaos that's there. To me, it kind of evokes the excitement of being at a Free gig, you know, which was they were never perfect. It was always, especially Kossoff was liable to, given his troubles and all the rest of it, you never quite knew what you're going to get from him. But All Right Now is not one of my favourite songs, but when I listened to the version on the live album just the other day there, and I'm like, I actually like that version of it, because it just sums up the excitement of going to see Free. I was lucky enough to go and see Free the following year, so they'd split up. Free Live came out, they got back together again, and Free at Last was brought out, and they were touring the Free at Last album when I saw them in Glasgow. So I was lucky. I only saw them once, you know, which was I was just lucky that I got to see them at all. And I think I'm right in saying that the time I saw them was it was the last appearance in the UK with the original lineup, because they went off to America after that on tour, and that was at the point when Andy Fraser kind of lost patience with the whole Kossoff circus and packed in. So yeah, an album that's really special to me. I mean, there's just so many great songs. Like a fantastic version of "Be My Friend," amazing version of "Fire and Water." Particularly that and Mr. Big. One of the all-time classic live tracks in my book. It's just, again, I was listening to it the other day, and I could feel so well up listening to Kossoff's solo. It's so simple, and yet it just sums up the brilliance of Paul Kossoff. We talked about it the other day, the whole less is more thing. In a way, you could just make one note, say as much as it take another guitarist 100 notes to say. It's just fantastic. Obviously you've got the Hunter. Again, which we talked about, which no self-respecting band back in those days could get away with not playing. And then you've got randomly get a great studio track on the end of Get Where I Belong. And I know you and I talked about it for life. I mean, I can't understand why that was included on Free Live, because it would easily have fitted on the Highway album. A beautiful song.
Yeah.
And there was so many good live tracks that came out on the later versions of Free Live that I don't understand why they didn't make it the first time round, but just one of the great live albums, which is absolutely timeless as far as I'm concerned. So that's a Stonewall 5 for me.
Yeah, right. Great choice. All right, great choice. Well, my number this one was a tough one. I was going to go with Lindisfarne Fog on the time, but I've changed my mind. I do apologise because I had them in the 1971. I thought I'd go with something different. And I've gone for number 8 with Nursery Crime by Genesis. This is on the Great Charisma label as well. This is the first album to feature Phil Collins and Steve Hackett, which improved the band significantly, in my opinion. I mean, the previous album, Trespass, is excellent, so feel free to go and get it and listen to it. It is superb, but you can hear that step up in musicianship. Hackett is a sublime guitarist, massively underrated, never gets mentioned enough, in my opinion. Basically a man who, he didn't invent it, but he really made the idea of tapping on the guitar really come to the fore, way before anybody else was really doing that sort of thing, and certainly 7 years before Eddie Van Halen made it a huge thing. And Phil Collins is a drummer extraordinaire, hugely underrated, gets lambasted because he's Phil Collins, really, but he's an incredible drummer. An incredible drummer at this point in his career. His playing's brilliant. He actually gets even better when he sort of does Brand X and does all the jazz fusion stuff. He just doesn't get mentioned enough as the great drummer that he is, as well as a great singer as well. And I'll come to that on this in a minute. So they complete what I call the classic lineup of Genesis, because they are. It's a short album again. Fabulous album. They've got a slight different tone sound as well, because Hackett, one of the things he did when he joined the band, he sort of coerced them into getting a Mellotron second-hand off King Crimson, and it changed the whole sound of the band. So it features quite a lot, and superb. I mean, the album kicks off with one of their greatest songs, arguably their greatest song, actually, The Musical Box, which is long. It's a good 10 minutes or so, a lengthy piece. It's the whole album's gothic. It's got this real gothic feel to it. Even the cover has got a gothic feel, with people playing croquet on a English garden lawn, this real posh house, but they're actually using people's heads for the balls. So you've got all that going on. And it's this sort of macabre, sort of Victorian feel to it. And the song's about a young lad called Henry. He's accidentally decapitated by his friend Cynthia while playing croquet. In his return to the house, Cynthia plays Henry's old musical box, which unleashes the spirit of Henry as an old man. Henry becomes sexually frustrated and attempts to seduce Cynthia. Absolutely nuts. The nurse enters the room, hurls the musical box at the wall, destroys both it and Henry. It's nuts. It's just really is crazy. The song, it's got loads of texture to it. It's obviously prog. It's got like real quiet, sensitive bits, and it's got this real power to it. And I know Peter Gabriel said that he wanted them at parts to sound like The Who, and they genuinely do. They've got this real power. And then this is really offset against other songs on the album, like Absent Friends and Harlequin, which are these beautiful pastoral sort of soft sounds. And then you've got the proto-metal of the Return of the Giant Hogweed with Steve Hackett doing all the diddle thing, which is again just incredible. What a great song that is, and great drumming off Phil Collins. One of my particular favourites on the album is Harold the Barrel, which is it's going to sound mad, but it's a comical song about suicide. And Collins and Gabriel do joint vocals. I always thought it was just Gabriel, but they do joint vocals. And Peter Gabriel states here, and I wrote this down there, what happens is that my voice is quite a lot of bass content, low content. Phil's, on the other hand, is much higher elements. He's sort of center of gravity, if you like, harmonically. So put the two together, and you sort of hear more of his voice than mine. Even though Harold the Barrel is my song, I think you do hear much more of Phil. I don't, actually. I thought it was more Gabriel. But their voices are very, very similar. Phil says, Harold the Barrel's good, fun song. It showed the kind of humor that was always part of Genesis. People take us very serious, but we did have a real sense of humor in the band, which they did. And there's some really funny lyrics as well. Up on the window ledge beside me, his mother made a last request. Come off the ledge. If your father were alive, he'd make it very, very upset. You just can't jump. You just can't jump. Your shirt's all dirty. There's a man here from the BBC. You just can't jump. And then the crowd shout, we can help you. We can help you. We're all your friends. If you come on down and talk to us, Harry, you must be joking. He says, take a run and jump. And then it goes off into this space-like sound as if he's lobbed off the end of a building. But it's really funny. It sounds mad, but it's really funny and it works superbly. And then finally, we get to the Fountain of Salmacis, which is based on a Greek myth between Salmacis and Hermaphroditus. It's great. Hackett is great on it again. And the album would have been even better if it had the track Twilight Alehouse, which they recorded and didn't put on. It's already a 5-star album, and go and listen to it. It's just a great bit of prog. It's a super, super album, in my opinion. So that was my number 8. What have you got at number 7?
Number 7, I've gone for another live album. It's a bit left field, but an album I absolutely love. Still have the original vinyl. Is Humble Pie, Rockin' the Fillmore. Again, to me, and I don't make no apologies for including two live albums, and because to me, the essence of rock music is great live music, and that's an album I can put on now, and it sounds as fresh now as it did then. I mean, it just comes blasting out speakers, and you've got, there was such an underrated band to me, Humble Pie. I think they kind of lived very much in the shadow of Led Zeppelin, which is a shame as far as I'm concerned. I think probably the biggest weakness is that they weren't great songwriters, I don't think. They did a couple of decent albums, Shine On was a good album, and Eat It was a good album too. And then later on you got into Smoking, which was a tremendous album as well. But I mean, highlighted by the fact that of the 7 songs on the original Rockin' the Fillmore, they only wrote one of the songs, which was Stone Cold Fever. The rest of them were all covers, so they're effectively probably the most famous cover band in the world. And I think it's probably right to say they were actually a bigger band in America than they were in the UK. I don't think they were really. Again, I think they suffered from comparisons with like say Led Zeppelin and maybe even Free and people like that. But I mean, they cracked the US in a way that Free never did. I mean, Free Live only made number 200 in the Billboard chart. But yeah, just a great. They're a fantastic band. Obviously a great frontman and Steve Marriott. Frampton's guitar playing is off the scale on this album too. And then you've got a great rhythm section in Greg Ridley and Jerry Shirley. I absolutely love Greg Ridley's bass playing, being a bass player myself, and I think he was hugely underrated as a bass player as well. Interestingly, there's a new A&M album of kind of rarities come out this week, which I was listening to today. Which, if you get a chance to listen to, it's absolutely fantastic. There's some great stuff on it. Really, really worth having a listen to. But they were a very, very soulful band. That obviously, having a frontman like Steve Marriott, that was always going to be the case. But just some fantastic stuff. I mean, if you could, 24-minute version of By Walking and Gilded Splinters by Dr. John, you can hear that. It's a bit of a you like it, you don't. But the great guitar playing on it is fantastic. And yeah, just an altogether fantastic album that I never really tire of listening to. I know you've got your own personal anecdote with Steve Marriott because you were telling me about it the other day.
I do, yes. I met Steve Marriott when I had a record shop when I was a young kid, and Steve came in. He was really nice. He saw the album, that one of their albums on the wall. Actually, started laughing. I should have got it signed. I don't know why I didn't. I was thinking about that the other day. Why didn't I get it signed? Anyway, he came in, and I was going to watch him that night in a little place called, I think it was it Zoots at the time, in Newcastle. And he said, he said, I'm playing tonight. And I said, oh yeah, I've got tickets. I was talking to him. He was really, really pleasant. He was in with his wife. And I was talking, and he goes, I said, I'm going to the bar next door if he's coming in for a drink. I said, oh yeah, we'll come in and have a drink. So I went in with the lad I was working with, and went into the bar and went, what's it called again? The Frog and Nightgown. And it was a bizarre part of town as well, because they were sort of, it's now the Pink Triangle in Newcastle, and we were in the Frog and Nightgown, and I think it was on that night, it was one of those weird nights where it was like a transvestite night, and we were in there, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. He's going, "Oh, blimey, some strange little women around here," and we were just sort of laughing, but it was really, really pleasant, really, really lovely man. And I went and watched them that night, and he was roadie for himself, so he was literally humping his amps on and stuff. It was really sad, actually. Humped his own amps on. They did like blues stuff. I don't need no doctor in that as well. His guitar playing was unbelievable. He's never mentioned as a guitarist, but what a player he was. Really great guitarist. And then vocally, of course, he's just on another planet, isn't he? You know, he's one of the great singers of all time. Mm-hmm. And I watched it there being this little kid who wants to be a blues rock singer, thinking, bloody hell, really? You got to be that good? You know? He was top draw. It probably features in my top 10 gigs of all time, and I've been to about 3,000 gigs, and I think that probably makes it. And he was mint. I saw him the following year at the Mayfair. It wasn't quite as good because it wasn't as intimate, and then he was dead the year after. You know, it was really, really sad. What an absolute shame. Great songwriter, lovely, lovely man, and tiny, of course. You know, yeah, great choice though. A lovely choice that you've gone with. My number 7 is in fact the band that they were going to get him to join at one point and he didn't, is the Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers. He was considered for when Brian Jones left. He was really mentioned, and he was mentioned again in '74. It's a great album, you know, worldwide smash all around the world, #1 everywhere. Covered by Andy Warhol with the zips, and if you pull the zip down, there's a pair of these old underpants. Everyone thought they were Mick Jagger's, but they weren't. They were apparently Andy Warhol's lovers. It was a take on him. This album is the Stones arguably at their peak. You know, it's hard to say. It covers a few genres that they do brilliantly. You know, rock, blues, country rock. It's got all that sort of feel to it, and the band are on fire. You know, it starts off with Brown Sugar, which is controversial now, was the lyrics, you know, and references to the sort of the slave trade and sex. Jagger argues that it's not really intended in a certain way, but he has dropped it from the set. Keith Richards wants to bring it back. You know, it's 50 years ago. I'm sure the crowd understands, you know, nothing's taken in a specific manner. We've then got other great songs on there like Sway, Can You Hear Me Knocking, you know, where Mick Taylor just stretches out on the guitar, and it's fantastic. Apparently they just all jammed that live. Wasn't even intended, they just kept the tape going. And it's about a 7-minute song. It's outstanding. You got to Move, the old Fred McDowell, Gary Davis song. Excellent. We've then got the subtly titled Bitch, which is fantastic. Again, another great song. And it just rocks, has a superb groove to it. Sister Morphine later on, possibly the best song on the album, you know, although the debate is Marianne Faithfull claims that she really wrote most of it beforehand and Keith and Mick have got their names on it. You know, who knows? It's a terrific song about drug addiction. It's really, really dark, yet really moving. Jagger sings it superbly. Can I add, though, if you get the chance, listen to Marianne Faithfull's version on the Broken English album. There's a sort of an additional version on there, which came out in the late 70s. That is also fantastic, where she's got this worn, weathered voice. Excellent. Other top songs, Dead Flowers, just a great country rocker. And then Moonlight Mile, which is like a soft song at the end, just to bring you down. Fantastic album. It's iconic. Everybody knows Sticky Fingers, how 5 stars all day long. One of the great albums. So, Paul, what have you got in at number 6?
Well, I'm going to shuffle things around here for the very reason that I had Sticky Fingers in at number 5, but since you've just talked about it at length, I'll sort of skim over that and just say it was an album which, I mean, I wasn't really into the Stones when I was in my teens. I have to be honest. It was more the Who, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and the Stones were kind of like different thing altogether. But a bit like Pink Floyd really grew on me, and I became to appreciate them much more later on in life. And I love Sticky Fingers. It's probably not my favourite Stones album. I'd say Let It Bleed is still my in any album that's got Give Me Shelter on it has got to be right up there. But I think for me it's a close second in terms of Stones albums. Got great tracks on it. As the Stones absolutely at the peak creatively as far as I'm concerned. There's not a bad track on it, and as you said, really sort of highlights the different kind of musical genres that the Stones touched on, really, whether it was the country stuff or the blues, straight on blues stuff, or the rockier stuff, But I love that album now. So that's definitely a 5 for me.
Right, so we're up to 5 now.
To be said about it, to be honest.
Yeah. Don't need to say any more. That's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, my number 6 is Brighter Later by Nick Drake. It's one of the most beautiful and melancholy albums ever recorded. Features a range of musicians as well as Nick Drake. Nick Drake, first of all, good guitarists who did these really weird guitar tunings. Don't know what they are, but they work perfectly. It's got Richard Thompson, Dave Pegg, so we got Fairport connection there. The strings, can I just mention, by Robert Kirby, are outstanding on this album. They just give this beautiful, exquisite feel to it. These arrangements are breathtaking. It is just a lovely, lovely album. It's an album you can't listen to one song on it. You've got to listen to the whole thing, or not at all. It is really one of those albums. It just goes on both sides, play it a lot. It's fabulous. Pete Perfides as well talks about the strings, and he says Kirby's breathtaking arrangements on Hazy Jane, issues a searching questionnaire to the soul. If anybody else actually cared to listen enough, it's beautiful. There's always this sort of reminiscent feel to it as well in terms of the album. It's sort of always drawing you back. It's beautiful. The album's got a bright touch to it compared to his previous album, and certainly compared to Pink Moon, which is really dark. This has got like a bright, bouncy feel to it. Yeah, it's quite dark, which sort of sums up Nick Drake as a character in many respects. The producer, John Wood, recalls the recording and says, very seldom do you make an album and say, there's nothing that I wouldn't want to change. But he says, Brighter Later is one of them. It's just a fantastic album from start to finish. It is genuinely a perfect album. I'm not going to say much about it. I'm just going to ask people, go out and buy it. Go out and buy it and listen to it. It's beautiful. It's pastoral. It's laid back. It's a nighttime album. It's got a beautiful little groove at times to it, and then it's got this just sense of space. It's also one of the most English albums that you're ever going to listen to. Very, very English. Couldn't have been made in any other country. It's just got this beautiful laid-back English feel, a bit like John Martin does as well. And they're all part of that sort of island group of folkies, if you like. And it's a perfect album. So that's my number 6 is Brighter Later by Nick Drake. So what have we got at number 5?
Number 5, again, an album I would never have dreamt of listening to when I was 15, but which I love now, is What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Absolutely fantastic album from start to finish, from my point of view. Everything about it is just tremendous. The vocals, obviously, that be Marvin Gaye, the arrangements, the songs, the kind of lyrical content as well, written from the perspective of a black Vietnam vet coming back from the war and having to deal with all the issues in a city life at that time, poverty and lack of jobs, and obviously racism and all the rest. And it's just a fantastic album. It touches on it ecological thing as well, and Mercy Mercy Me. Just fantastic. I mean, and obviously the backing band were the Funk Brothers, which were, you know, again featuring somebody who came to be one of my all-time bass playing heroes, and James Jamerson, whose bass playing is worth seeking out. You know, is worth just finding the music that he recorded over, you know, the whole kind of back catalogue of things that he played on, and just listen to the bass playing on it, because it's absolutely outstanding. Apparently, when he was recording this album, he was so wasted that rumour has it that he spent part of the time lying, because he couldn't stand up. He spent part of the time lying on the floor playing the bass lines for this, which I couldn't have played these bass lines if I was sober, let alone as wasted as he allegedly was. But just a great album, and it's not one that you can. I think it was we mentioned once before. It's not one you can dip into and dip out of. It kind of one track segues into the next, and you kind of have to listen to it in a one. But so it's a very short album. You're talking about short albums. It's only 36 minutes, but it's just quality from start to finish. So stone cold 5-star for me, that one.
Yeah, it really is absolutely outstanding album, isn't it? You know, and James Jamerson, apparently his bass, I was talking to somebody, I think it might be McCartney, who had a little go on it. Apparently the neck's slightly bent. It's really hard to play his bass, you know. The musicianship's great, isn't it? I mean, I'm going to put it in number 5 as well, because it was slightly higher, but I'm happy to leave it in at number 5. Just get it over and done with, if you like. It's an album to redefine Motown, because there'd been a singles label up to that point, and this album come along and changed them all. And they went from singles to singles and albums, and of course you get the great Stevie Wonder albums as well. That subsequently following another couple of great Marvin albums. So they're not just a singles label anymore. It's a lot of this is based on his brother Frankie as well, who was a vet in Vietnam. And is an album, it's almost like Love. It's been described as being like a companion to Love Supreme by Coltrane, where it's got that sort of ethereal feel to it. It's religious, it's spiritual, but it's also sort of got elements to earth and all the rest of it. It's an absolutely perfect album. It was slightly higher on my list, but I'm happy to talk about it now because we're on to it. There's no point in repeating myself later on. So yeah, Marvin Gaye. What's going on? It's an incredible album. It really is an incredible album. So I'll put that in.
It's interesting that Berry Gordy said that What's Going On was the worst thing he'd ever heard.
Yeah.
Which makes you question what he knew about music, you know. But,
well, he didn't want to initially release it, did he? You know,
no.
And only when Marvin kicked off did it get released, you know.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Berry Gordy realised, yeah, she's mine, and now ranks it, I believe, as his favourite ever album, which is in itself is somewhat ironic. So I'm going to put that in at number 5. So what have you got in at number 4 then?
Number 4, I have got Fireball by Deep Purple. Again, one of my all-time, well, my favourite bands at that time for definite. I mean, I had a lot of, probably The Who, my favourite band as a 15-year-old, but my favourite guitarist at that time, and my hero for a long time, was Ritchie Blackmore. You know, he could do no wrong in my eyes at that time. He was an absolute legend. And this was the third album by the Mark II, the kind of definitive Deep Purple lineup. And I read recently that Ritchie Blackmore himself came out and said he kind of dismissed the album and said it was too rushed. The label had kind of forced them to get it out quicker than they'd really wanted to. But there's just some great tracks. And the opening of Fireball with Ian Pace and the double bass drum was just like, wow, you know. It's a bit looser than In Rock, which is a fantastic album, but which is just like a kind of it's just a relentless onslaught of heavy rock. And I think Fireball, it's a bit looser, you know. There's a bit funkier. A lot of that's down to Roger Glover's tremendous bass playing on a few of the tracks. But you know, for all Blackmore talks about it being rushed, there's some tremendous guitar playing on it as well. That lovely languid style that Blackmore had, you know, just some great guitar solos on the mule and Fools. Just I mean, there's one track, Anyone's Daughter, which is a bit of a throwaway track, you know, a bit whimsical and can take that or leave it. But other than that, as a lot of people will probably argue that the next album, Machine Head, was the best of their albums. But and I'd probably go along with that. But I still love Fireball as well. You know, I think those three albums taken together, In Rock, Fireball, and Machine Head, for me, sum up Deep Purple at the best as a studio band. You know, so yeah, that's my choice.
The song Fireball as well, it's almost like the first sort of proto metal drumming song, isn't it? You know, in terms of the double bass drum. I mean, because obviously Motorhead would do it a number of years later, and Metallica and all those bands, like with Overkill with Motorhead, it was that sort of, you know. But this was before then, and he was doing it first. You know, Pace never gets mentioned for it. You know, he's just such an incredible drummer.
Very underrated drummer.
Yeah, good choice as well. Good choice. My number 4 is Allman Brothers at Fillmore East, which is just a great album. You know, it's what a fantastic album. Please go out and listen to it. If you get the chance, listen to the box set. It was recorded over 2 days in March '71. Where they were doing like multiple gigs over those days. The band are on fire. You know, it's just a fantastic mix. It allows the space. You know, the mix is so good. It allows, you know, the space required for such a great band. You know, Duane Allman is obviously at his peak at this point. He's so good. He's one of these guitarists who doesn't get mentioned anywhere near enough with the likes of Page and Clapton. And I think he's a better player, in my opinion. I think he's a better player, a bit more tasty on the guitar. Just outstanding on this at this point. The band are just great. They really are great. I love the sort of whole double drums thing. Again, just sounds superb. But the mix is so good. The space, it's almost like being in there with all that space going on around you. But apparently there's supposed to be more horns on, but they didn't want to mess up the mix. But it sums up the band. You know, you've got this blend of blues, country, rock, and a bit of jazz. And this album sort of encapsulates that time perfectly. You know, the dueling guitars of Dickie Bett and Duane Allman, just amazing. Some stellar songs on it. Statesboro Blue kicks off with that great slide of Duane Allman. It's one of my favorite ever intros to any album. I just adore it. It's magnificent. Greg Allman, his brother on vocals and keys. What a voice. What a great singer. And then you've got all these epics on there. You've got a few covers on as well, like Stormy Monday, but it's like 15 minutes long or something. Yeah, it doesn't seem too long because it's so good. It's an unusual version. It's brilliant. Brilliant playing. Then you've got these other songs. Whipping Post is ferocious and is brilliant playing on it. The band are just firing on full cylinders at this point. And then you got all that contrast with Hotlanta, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, really long songs, but they've got this real jazz feel to them as well. Again, all that space, all that sort of noodling, but it sounds perfect. The band are just unbelievable at this point. It's one of the greatest live albums of all time, in my opinion. They don't ever sound any better than this either. Allman Brothers do some great albums after, but this to me is Allman Brothers at their peak at Fillmore East. And that's my number 4. What have you got at number 3?
Number three, I've got Led Zeppelin 4. Fantastic album. I remember at the time when it came out, just the hype about it and the anticipation before the album came out. You know, Led Zeppelin riding on a high, and you know everything about the album. The album cover, which had no words on it, no name, anything on it. It was just like completely iconic album sleeve. Very weird album sleeve, but very iconic nevertheless. But I mean, the main thing was the music that it contained. You know, right from the beginning of Black Dog, you just knew it was going to be, you know, Led Zeppelin at their finest, and then straight into rock and roll, which is tremendous as well. But Evermore, the only duet that Plant ever did with Led Zeppelin, as far as I'm aware, with Sandy Denny, which is tremendous. Stairway to Heaven, I don't even think it's the best song on the album, to be honest. I mean, it's probably the most talked about Led Zeppelin track, and a bit of a albatross around the neck to a certain extent. One of my favourite stories with that was when there was an American radio show was offering. They were trying to raise money to to keep the radio station going, and they were asking listeners for pledges to persuade them to stop playing Stairway to Heaven, and Robert Plant was listening and actually sent them $10,000, which I think is hilarious. But he said it wasn't because he didn't like the song; it was just because he was sick of singing it. To be honest, But no, it's just Led Zeppelin absolutely in the pomp. To be honest, some just fantastic songs, and then you've got the lovely Go to California, which is completely different again from what's gone before. Just that kind of folky feel, which is just tremendous, And then for me, the best song on the album, When the Levee Breaks. I know it wasn't an original song, but just the drum sound in that is just something that's been people have tried to copy and
it's sampled to death
so many times. The sound that Bono managed to get in, I think it was the hallway of Headley Grange where they were recording it, is just absolutely incredible. And I've heard so many drummers trying to replicate that sound and don't come anywhere close. It's not just about the drumming, but just some great playing on it. Great.
After James Brown's Funky Drummer, I think it's the most sampled drum piece of all time, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think probably When the Levee Breaks is probably right up there, not far behind as well. But yeah, great album. Probably not my favourite Led Zeppelin album. I think we talked about that in a previous show.
What's the other show, folks? What's the Led Zeppelin show?
What's the Led Zeppelin show? Indeed, yeah. But it's still a great 5-star album, which I wouldn't want to be without. So there you go.
Yeah, I'll be listening to it more. It's just amazing. I've not put it in here because I listen to other albums more. I'm not saying it's not a 5-star album because it's absolutely top draw. There'll be times when I listen to it regularly and then I'll not listen to it for 6 months. Say one of those albums, but it is fantastic. I'm going to change mine around a little here, and it's just because I'm going to go with what I listen to most. And at number 3, I've got The Who's Next, which is just an epic album produced by Glyn Johns. It was recovered from the Lifehouse project that they were going to do. It was going to be another double album. Parts of it sort of Townsend brought back later on. And it was bizarrely going to be based about something about the internet, what would become the internet. So quite forward thinking, really. But Glyn Johns just put the song together and said, no, we'll go with this. And, it is a great album. It's an exceptional album. In many ways, it's the best Who straightforward album. Although I prefer other albums, it's the best straightforward rock album, if you like. It starts off with songs that we know, and maybe it's because I've heard it so often, it's down to 3. Barbara O'Reilly, is based on Maha Baba and the minimalist Terry Riley. It's just incredible. The opening synth bit is still amazing, and then you hear the bass come in and then the guitar and Moon flying in. The band are on top full form at this point. Bargain might even be my favourite track on the album now because I've heard the others so often. Scintillating performance by the band. One of my favourite ever lines as well. I'd gladly lose me to find you. What a line that is. Townsend's lyrics just off the map. My Wife, which is a really funny song, Entwistle wrote about his lovely ex-wife, actually, Alison. It's humorous, dark. The interplay between Moon and Entwistle they're on fire. They are literally on fire. They don't get any better than this. They're really on fire. The Song Is Over is left over from Lifehouse, and it's the central theme on the album in some respects. Personally, I would have had Pure and Easy on because I think it's one of the greatest songs that whoever recorded. I don't understand why it didn't make this album. Let's See Action I would have probably had on as well. Song Is Over is good, but them two, in my opinion, are better. In fact, really, it could have been a double album, and it would have been even more immense because the other songs that didn't make it that could have been on this, Water and so on and so forth. Behind Blue Eyes is marvelous, and my friend Ian and I went to see The Who just before lockdown in a little nightclub in Kingston in London. And we were doing an acoustic gig. There was about 200 people in the room. And Dalry explained the reason why his lyrics are so touching on it, in terms of his voice was breaking, he said a little bit, was because his dog had just died. and it really affected him while singing, you know, which is really sad. You know, so and it's again the playing of the band is just brilliant. And then of course we got Won't Get Fooled Again, which sums up Townsend's views on sort of government, revolution, that sense of deja vu. That's, you know, that when you think there's been something going on in, oh, not these again. Oh no, it's the same as before, you know, all that sense. And then Daughtry's primeval scream, you know, just hits you between the solar plexus. So the Who's Next, they're at the top of the game. I put it at 3 because I listened to 2 other albums more, probably because I've just sick to death of hearing bloody Barbara O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, you know, even though they're unbelievable songs, you know, play something else on the radio, you know. So what have you got in at number 2?
Well, number 2, I've got Who's Next as well, actually. My favourite, I mean, I was a huge Who fan as a teenager. Absolutely, I idolised them. I remember I went to see the Who, I think it was probably 72, actually. We were still playing a lot of stuff off Who's Next, and we probably put 2 on that album. And I was sitting like 5 rows in the front at Green Playhouse in Glasgow. I was absolutely awestruck. I think I've still got my ticket stub. It was 75 pence. I was sitting 7 rows from the front. I could practically reach out and touch Daughtry. It was that close. I don't think I've ever been so awestruck at a gig as I was at that. Seeing my sort of teenage heroes that up close and personal. So yeah, I absolutely love this album. I remember when we were speaking before about Top of the Pops, hearing that on Top of the Pops this particular night that Who were going to be on doing the new single, which was obviously Won't Get Fooled Again, and being absolutely beside myself for the whole idea that I was going to get to see the Who rushing home and sort of sitting in front of the TV an hour before it started, waiting for the Who to come on, you know, because in those days, you know, that was your access to seeing bands like that on TV was very, very limited indeed, you know. So the idea you were going to see them on the Top of the Pops, albeit for 3 minutes, was just something else. But it's just, there's not a bad track on that album, really. There's not a bad track on it. I mean, you know, you kind of said it all, Sid, but Behind Blue Eyes, I love Behind Blue Eyes. I just love the emotion in it, and the kind of and then the you know, Won't Get Fooled Again, which is a classic single. But then you've got Townsend starting to play around with synths for the first time, which is how Barbara O'Reilly came around, I think, you know. But yeah, just a fabulous album. Could easily be my number 1. Maybe should have been my number 1, but I'll put it in at number 2.
Yeah, I saw them do most of these songs live in '99 at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. And the Townsend was back to playing electric guitar again. They were really loud. They were absolutely incendiary that night. They were so loud, they were on fire. The band were brilliant. Daughtry's voice was great. There's a great version that they released as 2 CDs live at the Bush. It was like a fan club thing. I've got it. I'll give you a copy at some point. It's brilliant. Yeah. The playing is out of this world. At the end, Townsend smashed his amp because the amp made a little, started conking out, and he just went berserk. And the crowd went, wow! The crowd literally took the roof off the place. One of the greatest top 3 gigs I've ever been to. They were superb. They did virtually all of Who's Next. What a gig that was. Anyway, I digress, folks. Who were the best? Unbeatable. Number 2 for me is Faces, Nods as Good as a Wink to a Blind Horse. I just love it. It's got everything I want to hear in a great rock album. It swaggers, it's beautiful as well, and it rocks. It's the album that, for me, and controversial, but I think it rivals and surpasses the Stones' Sticky Fingers. This is the best album that Ron Wood ever played on, in my opinion. And I asked him that question once in the Uncut magazine, and he responded by saying he thought Some Girls was the best album. Ron, we know you're fibbing, mate. We know you're fibbing. Some Girls, good album. Not as good as Wink, great album. You know, it's a genuinely great album. And Ron Wood's playing on it is immense. Really, really, he's on peak form at this point. The tone is great. Rod is really, really at the top of his game as well vocally. He's one of the great soul blues rock singers. I've said before, alongside Paul Rodgers, he was the best blues rock singer on the planet. You know, those 2 were the 2 that stood out from everybody else doing that style of music. I mean, just an incredible voice. The production again by Glyn Johns, who's a busy man in 1971, is great. I love the opening bars of Miss Judy's from that dirty guitar tone that Ronnie Wood's got. But the writing's great, and it's quite political. You would never think Rod Stewart writes from a political viewpoint, but he's writing from the perspective of a young black man on a cotton field who's being sexually abused by a plantation owner. He fights back, and then the National Guard get called in. It's really political. We then have totally the opposite end of the spectrum with You're So Rude. It's a sweet and innocent song with Ronnie Lane about a young couple getting caught in the act. You know, it's really funny but lovely. We then got again the ultimate cock rock song with Stay With Me. In the morning, don't say you love me because I'll only kick you out the door. It's Rod Stewart, just brilliant. And when it speeds up at the end there with the band flying in at full force, they're just incredible. They're just incredible. Just brilliant. Kenny Jones as well, I must mention, what a great rock drummer he is. We then have arguably the best song on the album with Debris. It's just beautiful. Ronnie Lane, it's a sentimental ode to his father. You know, and it's got the lovely line as well. We both know you got no money. I wonder what you'd do without me hanging around, which is, it's lovely, man. Every time I hear it, I just think, what a great song this is. Lovely cover of Memphis by Chuck Berry. And then you got That's All You Need at the end, about two brothers, one poor musician and one who's made it as a successful businessman. Always reminds me of my friend Simon with the line, because we sing this when we're drunk. This is the line, there's a knock on the door. I thought it was a Third World War. What a line that is. What a great line. Just love it. Ronnie Wood rocking out with a slide at the end. His slide playing on this album is just, you know, immense. And then we've got, there's also, it is an album. It's a huge influence. It's mentioned in Steve Jones's book, how much he loved the Faces, and based his tone a lot on Ronnie Wood. And also, of course, Glenn Matlock was a huge fan, and then went and filled in as the bass player for the Faces later on in life. It's number two. It's number two because I play it so often, and I just love it. It's just one of those albums I genuinely love. So go and listen to it, folks. So now for the big end, what have you got at number one?
Well, number one, I've gone for Rory Gallagher's first solo album, which again, for very personal reasons, in the sense that Rory Gallagher, it was the first concert I ever went to when I was 15. I went to Glasgow to see him play in this little club called the Electric Garden up Sauchiehall Street. There was a minibus full of us from school went through to see this gig again. I can still remember it as if it was yesterday. You know, Rory with his check shirt on, playing his battered Strat, and this first solo album had just come out, so he played 6 or 7 songs, I think, from that album. It's just an amazing album. I mean, it just come out the breakup of Taste. Taste had brought out 2 really good albums. The first one, a very raw, very electric blues album. Second one, which was very much more different sound to it. It was very much more expansive, and there was a lot of jazzy stuff on it, and different directions, a lot of folk stuff, sort of folky stuff on that as well. And I think the Rory Gallagher first album kind of followed on from that. There's just some incredible songs on it. Incredible guitar playing, as you would imagine. I mean, Laundromat, great.
What a great opener, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic. And then you've got the kind of jazzier things like Just a Smile. One of my personal favourites, I Fall Apart, which is a love song, really. I mean, the lyrics to that, you're talking about lyrics before there, is the line that says, like a cat playing with a ball of twine, you're playing with my heart. And it's just like fantastic. But again, the guitar playing is off the scale on that particular track. And you've got the kind of more straight up rock blues things like Hands Up and Sinner Boy. But then you're into the likes For the Last Time, which apparently was written about the breakup of Taste and the thing, you know, the kind of the bad taste that pardon the pun, the bad taste that I'd left with Rory, and it was never going to put himself in a situation where that sort of thing could happen to him again. Not really sure what happened, but I think it was a big fallout, and egos came into play, and the other 2 guys in Taste weren't happy that Rory got all the limelight, but he was writing all the songs. So, you know, what did they expect kind of thing, you know? And then you've got a fabulous track, the last track on the original version of it was Can't Believe It's True, which is another really jazzy song, which features Rory playing sax as well as playing guitar. Hugely underrated for his sax playing. The album also featured, only really discovered this other day, Vincent Crane of Atomic Rooster playing keyboards in some tracks, which I hadn't actually realised was the case. But it's just a tremendous album, which I'll make no apologies for putting in at number one, because it's so personal to me in the sense that it was my first introduction to live music, and I would say to anyone, just go, if you haven't heard it, go and listen to it. The guitar playing, the songwriting is just off the scale. Really good. Yeah,
really good album. Listened to it the other day, actually. Juice as well was the other one that came out that year as well, isn't it?
Same year, exactly. Came out the same year.
And again, another excellent album.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, really good choice. Great choices. Yeah, I listened to that the other day. Super album. My number one, no surprise to anybody, is Hunky Dory by David Bowie, released December 71. It's the first album to include Trevor Bolder, who was an incredible bass player, one of my favourite ever bass players, and never gets mentioned. So this is the first album with all of the Spiders. Engineered superbly by Ken Scott, who also did the Lindisfarne album, which didn't quite make my list, although it probably should have done. And features the genius of Rick Wakeman on piano. I had the pleasure of meeting Rick Wakeman once in Soho about 5 years ago, and I was with my kids at the time, and I goes, I'm going to go and talk to him. So I walked over, sidled over, and I started talking to him. And I said, listen, I listen every morning. You wake me up in the morning, because one of the songs is my sort of ringtone. And he was one of the loveliest men I've ever met. He was enormous. He's absolutely huge physically. He's so tall. And he kept shaking me, and oh, bless you, that's really lovely to see. And he goes, funnily enough, I've just been to talk about David this morning and talk about Hunky Dory. And he said, it's the best album I've ever played on. He says, I've never heard a collection of songs that are so good, all in one go. He said, David kept playing these songs. He said, I couldn't believe how good they were. What a lovely man he was. What a lovely, lovely man. And as an album, it fits into that sort of singer-songwriter style that was really popular at the time. I mean, there are great albums that don't make this list from 71. Carole King, Tapestry, one of the greatest albums of all time, and it doesn't make me top 10. Joni Mitchell, Blue, another fantastic album, doesn't get in. And obviously you had Neil Young. David Crosby released a great album this year as well. It doesn't quite make it. Yet this, for me, is the peak of all of those sort of singer-songwriter albums. You know, it starts off with Changes, with Turn and Face the Stream, one of those great songs. It's about alienation in terms of children and adults. He sums it up perfectly. Oh You Pretty Things, another great song. Got the line, let me make it plain, you're going to make way for the Homo Superior, which is a term that came up with a conversation with Roger Price and David Bowie at Granada Studios. And the guy went on to actually make the TV show The Tomorrow People about the idea of the Homo Superior. So, Bowie went down and wrote the song, and, very clever, actually. Beautiful. Life on Mars was inspired by My Way, but it's sublime. And it's arguably a lot of Heroes. It's his big sort of, it's the song now, isn't it, that we associate with him. Quicksand, again, about the idea about the Superman, and has my favorite ever lyrics in the song. I'm not a prophet or a Stone Age man, just immortal with the potential of a Superman, which is probably my favorite ever line in the song. It's really moving. He did it when I saw him in '97 on the Earthling tour at the Riverside Newcastle. It was a great song to start off with. Fill Your Heart, which is the one I mentioned about, which was the ringtone, is a Paul Williams song. Who wrote all the songs to Bugsy Malone, and it's all co-wrote with Biff Rose. Lovely, bouncy, bright, a lovely song. Andy Warhol and Bob Dylan, two songs that Bowie wrote for other artists about them, and neither of them liked the songs. Andy Warhol didn't like his song, thought it was quite rude. Bob Dylan apparently didn't like it, which is somewhat ironic. They're both great songs. I love the opening with Andy Warhol. Hole, as in holes. It's really funny. Queen Bitch is a proto-punk song, better than anything the Velvet Underground did, in my opinion. There, I've said it. I don't care. And then Bewley Brothers. Many interpretations for this song. Some say it's about schizophrenia. Some say it's about a gay sexual experience or gay sexual jubilance, is what I've written. I think it could be a combination of both. You know, you got the line "back upon the arch," the devil take me. Yeah, it's great song. And then it had this mad bit at the end. It's these speeded up lyrics and that. It's a perfect album. In fact, it could have been even more perfect if you put the song Bombers on as well, which they wrote. It was a really catchy song and somehow didn't make it. It's now subsequently just been released with with Bombers has been released as a sort of track on a box set. Go and get it. My number one, Hunky Dory. Yeah, it's not even in my top 3 Bowie albums. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So there we are, folks. There's our top 10 choices of 1971. What didn't make your list, Paul? What was really close?
John Martin album, which you mentioned before, was really close to making it. I love that album. Harmony Row by Jack Bruce. Jack Bruce being one of my heroes. Was on my original list but didn't make it. Killer by Alice Cooper is a fantastic album as well. I'm not a huge Alice Cooper fan. It's probably the only album I ever actually owned of his, but it was an album which I loved when it came out. And then, I mean, you've got Nantucket Sleigh Ride by Mountain. I love that album as well, which has got some fantastic songs on it. And the Carpenters as well. You know, Karen Carpenter's voice is just fantastic.
And she's an incredible drummer. Go and watch her on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Other than the albums you mentioned, like Joni Mitchell Blue, which I wasn't into Joni Mitchell back then, but I really like her now. So yeah, that's an omission as well. But yeah, there's so many albums that didn't make it, but could only choose 10. So there you go.
Yeah, a couple of honourable mentions for me. Yes, Fragile, great album. Can't Take Omega was very close. Ramon by Paul McCartney is an exceptional album. Aqualung, Jethro Tull. B.B. King live at Cooks County Jail. I absolutely love it. It's just really, really funny. And it has the best intro to any album I've heard, where he's playing at this jail. And before the band come on, they introduce the judge who sent down most of the people. And everyone starts booing. It's really, really funny. Get the chance to go and listen. It's a great live album. A couple of others, Just As I Am by Bill Withers is brilliant. And of course, Fog on the Tyne by Lindisfarne should probably be in. It's immense. So there we go, folks. There's our top 10. Let us know your opinions. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't just watch it. Come and sign it. Come on, sign up and subscribe. Okay, so till the next time, folks, thank you very much. Take care and look after yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye.